You've started things you never finished. You've switched directions more than once. And somewhere along the way, you decided that made you less serious, less disciplined, less capable than people who just stayed. I want to spend the next few minutes completely dismantling that story. Because the evidence says the opposite is true. There's a corner in your home, or maybe it's a shelf, maybe it's a drawer, where the evidence lives. The guitar you played obsessively for 4 months and then stopped touching. The sketchbook with 12 pages filled and 48 blank. The certification course still frozen at 34% complete. The language app with a 47-day streak you broke on a Tuesday for no particular reason. You walk past it sometimes and feel something you've never quite found the right word for. Not regret exactly, not laziness. Something quieter and more corrosive than both. The feeling that you are somehow constitutionally incapable of finishing what you start, that everyone else received a manual for how to build a life in one direction, and yours got lost in the mail. That while other people were compounding, you were just collecting, starting, stopping, moving on. And somewhere along the way, you began to wonder if the problem wasn't the hobbies, wasn't the courses, wasn't the timing. The problem was you. And by the end of this, you will have a new name for what you've always called your biggest flaw. A name that will change how you see the next decade of your life. Every mentor, every career coach, every LinkedIn think piece has delivered the same verdict. Pick one thing. Go deep. Become the expert. The world rewards specificity. A mastery is the destination. And so you have tried, genuinely, effortfully tried, to be the kind of person who stays. You have made the spreadsheets, you have set the 90-day goals, you have deleted the new browser tabs before they could distract you. But your brain keeps moving, keeps sniffing new problems, keeps falling in love with something adjacent, something unexpected, something that has absolutely nothing to do with the lane you promised yourself you'd stay in. And the worst part isn't the switching. The worst part is the guilt that follows it. The inner prosecutor that shows up every single time and reads the charge: lack of discipline, failure to commit, chronic dilettantism. You have spent years interpreting that movement as a defect, as evidence of something missing in you that other people quietly, competently have. And here's what nobody says out loud. What if it isn't a defect at all? What if everything you've been calling chaos is actually architecture? Rare, adaptive, and built precisely for a world that specialists aren't equipped to navigate. What if the verdict was wrong from the beginning? Not because you were misunderstood, but because the people delivering it were using the wrong map entirely. But to understand why your brain works exactly this way, you first need to understand one thing about the environments where humans learn at all. And the answer might surprise you because it makes your so-called problem look like a strategic advantage. The entire framework you've been judging yourself by was designed for a different kind of environment. Psychologists call it a kind learning environment, a context where the rules are fixed. A feedback is immediate and repetition is rewarded. Chess is a kind environment. Surgery is a kind environment. Golf is a kind environment. In all of them, the specialist wins. Deep expertise becomes a compounding machine. The more you repeat, the better you get, and the more the system rewards you. The entire architecture of formal education was built on this model. Learn the fixed rules, master the fixed domain, enter the fixed career. But the world you actually live in is not kind. It is wicked. And this distinction, this single distinction, is what changes everything about how you should understand yourself. And here is the part that nobody in the pick one thing camp ever addresses. What happens to the specialist when the rules change? Not gradually, overnight. A wicked environment is one where the rules shift constantly, the feedback is delayed and ambiguous, and yesterday's winning strategy becomes tomorrow's liability. The journalist who spent 15 years mastering print watches the entire medium restructure around her. The financial analyst finds his models automated. The marketing expert discovers the algorithm has rewritten itself again, for the fourth time this year. Technologies make entire skill sets obsolete in under a decade. In a wicked environment, the specialist is a precision instrument built for a problem that keeps changing shape, exquisitely designed, increasingly irrelevant. Your brain sensed this. Long before you had language for it, your nervous system was performing threat assessment. It was noticing, at some level below conscious articulation, that the room kept changing, that the rules kept shifting, and that the people who went all in on one bet kept getting caught when the game changed. And so it did what any intelligent adaptive system does in an unpredictable environment. It stayed mobile. It built range instead of depth, not because it couldn't commit, but because some part of you always understood, intuitively, almost biologically, that in an environment that never stops changing, the worst possible strategy is to only speak one language. Your drifting was never distraction. It was intelligence operating at the right frequency. You just didn't have a framework that could receive the signal. So instead, you received the judgment. And you internalized it so completely that it started to sound like your own voice. And then there is a specific psychological mechanism that explains why your brain does something a specialist literally cannot do. Something companies pay millions for and still don't know how to find in a job interview. I'm going to give you 3 examples in a moment. Real mechanisms, not metaphors. And after the third one, I want you to think about one thing you learned years ago that you quietly abandoned, because I think you'll realize it's still working inside you right now in ways you haven't named yet. There is a concept in cognitive psychology called far transfer, the ability to take a principle or structure from one domain and apply it somewhere it has never been applied before. Near transfer is easy. A surgeon gets better at surgery by doing surgery. Far transfer is rare, difficult to teach, and in a wicked environment, worth more than almost any single domain skill. It is what happens when a musician notices that harmonic tension and release maps perfectly onto the structure of a compelling sales narrative, when a beekeeper uses colony behavior to redesign how a software team handles ambiguous problems, when a novelist applies narrative tension to the architecture of a product onboarding experience. These are not metaphors, these are mechanisms. The musician who became a sales strategist, the beekeeper who became an organizational designer, the novelist who became a product thinker, they are performing far transfer. Taking the deep structural logic of one domain and transplanting it into another, where it arrives as something that looks, to specialists, like inexplicable creative insight, like magic, like genius. Far transfer is not a skill you can teach in a course. It is the cognitive byproduct of having built real knowledge across multiple, seemingly unrelated domains. Every domain you entered and eventually left deposited something in you, a structural insight, a mental model, a way of seeing problems that people who only know one domain have never had access to. You were never collecting abandoned hobbies. You were accumulating source material for synthesis that specialists can't even conceptualize because they've never left the building long enough to see that other buildings exist, let alone that the buildings rhyme. Your value was never in your depth alone. It was always in the bridges you can build between worlds that other people can't see from inside their single, very deep hole. This is what it means to be M-shaped. And you've heard of the T-shaped person, a broad general knowledge with one pillar of deep expertise. The T-shape is the current gold standard of professional development, and it is genuinely valuable. Do not misread this as a dismissal. But the M-shaped person has something rarer and, in a wicked environment, something more durable, multiple pillars of genuine depth, connected by a bridge of insatiable generative curiosity. Not surface-level familiarity. Actual knowledge, actual competence. The kind that took real time and real confusion to build, and that you then, according to every conventional framework, abandoned. Think about the last time someone asked what you do, and you felt that familiar hesitation, that half second where you decided which version of yourself to present, which pillar to lead with, which part to leave out so they wouldn't furrow their brow and say, "So what exactly is your focus?" That hesitation has a name now. It's not confusion, it's the M-shape trying to fit into a T-shaped conversation. The M-shape is not a T-shape that couldn't commit. It is a different architecture entirely, built for different terrain, optimized for different conditions. But there is one mistake that almost every M-shaped person makes, and it doesn't just slow down your progress. It can destroy the very architecture you've been building for years without even realizing it. The trap is this: trying to build all the pillars at once, waking up one January with a clarity that feels like destiny. This is the year they master data science and finish the novel and launch the business and finally learn conversational Mandarin. And for 3 weeks, it is electric. The tabs are open, the notebooks are new, the momentum feels real. And then it collapses. Not into failure exactly, but into that specific, familiar exhaustion. The feeling of being spread so thin that nothing is actually moving, that you are somehow busy and stagnant simultaneously. This doesn't collapse because you lack discipline. It collapses because it violates the physics of how deep learning works. Genuine depth requires cognitive immersion, the kind where the subject starts to follow you into the shower, into your dreams, into your unguarded moments. That immersion cannot be time shared. You cannot grow multiple root systems in the same soil at the same time without starving all of them. The attempt to build the full M simultaneously is not ambition. It is the old shame in a new disguise. And the model that actually works is serial mastery. Life lived in seasons, one pillar at a time, built with full presence and full permission. You go deep, genuinely, competently, usefully deep, and then you move. Not because you failed, because the season is complete. You carry what you've built into the next season, and over years, those pillars accumulate. And eventually, something extraordinary happens. They start to speak to each other. The music theory season speaks to the business structure season. The language learning season reshapes how you approach code. The pottery season teaches you something about patience and relationships that 5 therapy sessions couldn't. You are not behind, you are between seasons. There is a profound difference, and you need to let it replace the story you have been telling yourself. When the final piece, and this one lands differently once you feel the weight of it, is redundancy. In evolutionary biology, redundancy is not waste. It is survival architecture. Elephants carry multiple copies of a cancer-suppressing gene. If one version fails, another activates. The most robust systems in nature, immune systems, ecosystems, neural networks, are not the most efficient ones. They are the most redundant ones. Efficiency is optimized for a predictable world. Redundancy is optimized for a world that keeps surprising you. Your graveyard of hobbies is your genetic redundancy. The skills you built and abandoned are not lost. They are dormant pillars, waiting. When one skill becomes obsolete, and in a wicked world they always eventually do, another activates. When the industry you spent 10 years in restructures overnight, you don't start from zero because you never only built in one place. The specialist is efficient, brutally, impressively efficient, but efficiency is optimized for stability, and stability is not guaranteed. It never was. The M-shaped person is not efficient. They are unbreakable. And all of this leads to one question, the only question that actually matters after everything we've unpacked. Who exactly are you, if not the person they taught you to believe you were? So let's talk about you, specifically. You who has apologized for your brain in job interviews, framing your range as a liability to be explained rather than an architecture to be offered. You who has edited yourself in relationships. I learned to stop talking about the new thing you're excited about because you've watched people's eyes glaze over with the quiet judgment that you can't commit. You who has run the internal monologues so many times. Why can't I just pick one thing? Why can't I just stay? What is wrong with me? That it has started to feel like your actual voice instead of an accusation you borrowed from a world that was built to accommodate a different kind of mind. Those weren't wasted years, not one of them. Every season you lived in, every skill you touched, every domain you explored, every half-finished notebook, was a semester in a university you designed yourself, with a curriculum that no institution could have built for you, because no institution has ever seen your specific configuration of depth and range and synthesis before. The Portuguese you started, the watercolors you tried, the blockchain rabbit hole you disappeared into for 6 weeks. Each one left a deposit. Each one changed the shape of how you think in ways you are still discovering. The career coaches were not lying. They were just describing a different architecture, a perfectly valid one, built for kind environments, built for a world that hasn't changed its rules in 30 years. You were built for the other world, the wicked one, the one that's already here, the one that keeps changing the rules and then looking around for whoever managed to stay useful anyway. That's you. That has always been you. You were never meant to be one thing. You were built to be the bridge between many things. The rare mind that can stand in 5 different territories at once and see what connects them. That is not a flaw they forgot to fix. That is the architecture. And it has always had a name. You just hadn't heard it applied to you yet. So the next time someone asks you what you do, pause. Not because you don't know the answer, but because you finally do. And it's bigger than any single title they were expecting.